Talking about conversation today for the fourth week. And conversation specifically that's for building community. You see, the thing is, we as a church, we at Community Church, are really committed to building community, and we do it best through conversation. So today, thinking about how to deal with disagreement and dissent, because if you start having real conversations, then people are going to disagree. People are going to bring their stuff. So what do you do when we disagree? When there's dissent? Welcome to the Takeout from Community United Methodist Church in North Muskegon, Michigan. CommunityChurchUMC.org. Check us out anytime. This is up 10 o'clock worship in person in the sanctuary now. Also 10 o'clock worship right here on Facebook. And if you're interested in supporting what we do, go to our website, learn how you can do that. Glad you're here. You matter. Now the thing is, when you get into a conversation, you know you matter. Your opinions matter. But sometimes in a conversation, you get there and I'm not sure you matter to everybody else, to anybody else, to the person in charge, to the person up front, to the person managing the conversation. And you find yourself in a conversation where you just disagree. And you think, man, they're heading down a path and they're getting dumb. Or maybe I used to sort of hang with these people and I used to buy into these ideas, and now I've got some reasons why I'm doubting, and I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how to bring my doubt. And then if I bring my doubt, what's going to happen? Is anybody going to actually change anything? Is anybody going to listen? So that listening thing, huge. So we worry when we bring dissent. We worry when we bring disagreement, and it makes us tense. You know, have you found that? And you find yourself in a place where someone's up front, or there's some sort of kind of public gathering, and you disagree. It happens like at a town council meeting, and it's like, we don't agree with the plan to redo the water mains, or we don't agree with a plan to whatever it is. And because you're face to face with people and disagreeing, your blood pressure goes up, and you might even start shaking. Weird. We get all these reactions because we're afraid someone will judge us negatively. We're afraid someone won't think good things about us. We're afraid they'll talk bad about us right in front of our faces. And we're afraid they won't listen. I was 14, I ran away from home, I came back. Not entirely willingly, after a couple of weeks. And my dad asked me, "So why'd you run away?" And the answer was, from me, at 14, because nobody listens to me. There's a really big deal about being heard, being listened to. It matters. It doesn't always matter whether everything changes after you've said your piece. I used to work in a little tiny country church. I worked there for 7 years. It was one of 2 churches I had at the time. I loved the people of that church. I went to a meeting, one of the first meetings after I was pastor. They were deciding on something they had to do. Are we going to repave the parking lot, or one of those kind of things you have to talk about? And I said, so it sounds to me like it's kind of half of you or several of you on each side of this question. So how are you going to deal with it if you just take a vote? I thought, it doesn't seem like just taking a vote is a way to make sure everyone gets heard. And he said, after we make a decision, we always honor the shared decision. And we don't fight about it after. And I was amazed. This little church, it was called Arden, they really had that figured out. Yes, we hear each other. Yes, we love each other. We care about each other. We want good things for each other. And we disagree about stuff. And the fact that we disagree about stuff, about how, what to spend the money on or what needs fixing or whatever, does not take away from the basic respect and love we have for each other. Man, if only we, the rest of us in the world could learn this, so we could disagree and feel differently about things, feel differently about politics, feel differently about vaccinations, and feel differently about how to raise your kids and how to educate them, feel differently about international things, and feel differently about what kind of food you like to eat. But feel differently. And still respect each other, not call each other names, not try later to undermine each other. Yeah, if only we could learn the value of respectfully listening, disagreeing, moving on. Not having to fix it. So I'm going to read you a story from Genesis. It's the first book in the Bible. It's Genesis 18 is a story about Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah were husband and wife. And they had a lot of stories about them. It takes chapters and chapters. But they have two pieces in this one story about disagreeing. So I want you to think about, just before we start on this story, think about what are the basic ways you can respond when someone disagrees. If you happen to be in charge of a conversation, or you're a leader in a conversation, or you're just a person sharing in a conversation, how do you respond when someone says, I really don't go along with that? Or someone says, let's think about this again. Let's reconsider. Or, I don't think we've considered this. Or, I just don't feel comfortable with this. These are the phrases that polite people use when they want to disagree. There are lots of other phrases that impolite people use when they want to disagree, but either way, people disagree. People stand up in front of the town council and they hold forth and say, you guys this and you guys that. You gotta understand, they talk really mad sometimes, probably because they're stressed about public speaking. But how do we respond to them? If we're hanging on to our disagreement, if we still disagree with them, they haven't persuaded us quite yet, or we're not really buying their point of view, how do we disagree? Well, you could do like, some people, if you have enough authority, you can say, arrest those people, take them out of here, get rid of them. And then call them names and insult them and, send your thugs to beat them up. This is a Mussolini approach. That's the first one. Let's not do that, okay? Really show them. The second approach is one that I confess I have probably done more than I should. When I have been in a meeting and there's a disagreement and I'm on one side, and I know people tend to sort of listen to the pastor probably more than they ought to. They give us more authority probably than we ought to have. And so sometimes I'll defend myself. I'll defend my idea. I'll defend this plan over here. Even if I'm only half-baked about the plan and I'm willing to have my mind changed, I just figure, yeah, I'll defend this thing, and not everybody deals well with that. And not all of us are very good at doing it. There have been plenty of times when I've been under some pressure and I've argued back, and then I realized arguing back was not the healthy thing to do right then. I really needed to do number 3. If number 1 was, be mean and vindictive, and number 2 was defend yourself, then number 3 is listen with respect and say thank you. Thank you. And maybe I respond. Maybe I don't need to. The important thing they need is to be heard. Not being heard. It's been a thing since I was 14. It's been a thing in the world forever. Forever there have been rebels who say, we're left out, we're cut out, get so frustrated that they refuse to be part of civilized discussion at all. So here's a story promised long ago. Genesis 18. And there are 2 stories of people, first time Sarah, second time Abraham, and they disagree with God, or they just don't believe God, or they just think what God is saying is not good enough. And how God responds to their disagreement. I think it is awesome that God engages, listens, responds some, doesn't defend himself. He's a model in this conversation. He says, the Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him, and when he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. Now, if you want to think about hospitality, he's going to just show off Middle Eastern 1800 BC hospitality at its very best. He's a model for it, and it's here on purpose. It's here on purpose because the story about Sodom and Gomorrah is coming up in chapter 19, and their big sin, despite what you may have heard elsewhere, their big sin is their failure to be hospitable. And hospitality is one of the things that we fail at when we fail to listen. When we fail to listen and care enough to pay attention, when we don't care enough to get interested in a person who's in front of us and what they have to say and their crazy ideas. If we don't care enough to listen to them, we are showing really bad hospitality. So, here we go. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, don't pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought. And wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." And so they said, "Do as you've said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd, took a calf. Not hear that? He ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and good, gave it to the servant who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he'd prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. He is showing off exactly how to do that. And he stood nearby. He made himself a servant, just as he said at the beginning, "Honor your servant by staying." They said to him, "Where's your wife, Sarah?" And he said, "There, in the tent. Then one said, I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son. I want you to just context here. He's like 99. She's like 75. She's a little postmenopausal. Might be a little surprising if Abraham himself is going to succeed at finishing this whole project. And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind them. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I've grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied, saying, I didn't laugh, for she was afraid. He said, oh yes, you did laugh. Yeah. Their son, by the way, will be named Isaac, which means laughter. Think about how God has responded to Sarah. Sarah has dissented, but she's tried to keep it secret. Now, you've probably done that. You've disagreed with your boss, disagreed with your parents, disagreed with, somebody else, and you have kept quiet about it. You haven't said a darn thing about it. You have kept it in because you don't want to get in trouble, don't want to ruffle too many feathers, and yet you really haven't believed. And maybe you've said something to somebody, maybe you've just said it to yourself. But God is attentively, carefully listening and paying attention to what Sarah says, to what Sarah's thinking. He's reading. God is paying attention to you and what you're thinking. And God knows when you're saying to yourself, that's never going to happen. That doesn't work. I don't know if I believe this stuff. God is not coming down on you and saying, oh, you terrible person. God's saying, well, at least own up to it. Tell me why you think that. And God is wanting to engage in a conversation, wanting to show interest in Sarah. And Sarah is not ready to have that conversation. She's still pretty chicken because she's just figured out this is probably God out there. And even if I don't believe, it seems like a bad idea to say, oh, come on. That can't happen. Because look, I'm old. He's old. Forget it. It's not happening. Which is the obvious thing that she was thinking. And she's a little shy. So the great thing that God does here is to engage, to say, tell me more. Why do you think that? But she doesn't go along. And he goes, okay. And moves on to other things. This is a good leader in a conversation. This is a really good leader in a conversation who, well, if you're not ready to share, that's fine. I'm not going to press you about it. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to prove it, whatever. I'm just going to say, I've still got my agenda, and you haven't changed it. So if you're not going to own up, oh well, moving on. Second part of the story right here. Then the men set out from there, and they looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do, seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? No, for I've chosen him, that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, how great is the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, and that ties us into the other story, and how very grave their sin. I must go down and see whether they have done all the stuff they're saying they did. And so the two out of the three start heading off to Sodom, and one is left with Abraham. And we're figuring this one's the Lord, and I don't know who the other two were, angels, whatever. So the men turned from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. And you can just see he's like a Quaker. He's starting to shake. He's a little nervous to bring something up. And besides, this feels like it's stepping out of his role as the gracious host. He's stepping into a role of conversation partner. And we're a little nervous about becoming conversation partners with God, which is probably why most of us do such a terrible job of prayer. But then Abraham came near and said, "Will you, indeed, sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are, 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not forgive it for the 50 righteous who are in it?" He's negotiating. This is not the only story, by the way, of Abraham negotiating. He negotiates a couple times, and he's pretty good at it. It's a respectable art form, negotiating. Will you not forgive it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you. He's pointing at God. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous, get the same outcome as the bad people. I mean, the whole story presumes that there's such a thing as good people and bad people, and somehow we can tell the difference. But this is something the Lord is willing to go along with. Oh, okay. If I find at Sodom 50 righteous people in the whole city, I will forgive the whole place for their sake. What a great thing. I suppose the Lord knows. If the Lord is the Lord, then the Lord knows how many righteous people there are in Sodom. But the Lord is not surprised. And the Lord accepts. Okay. I hear what you're saying, and you've spoken to my identity and who I am and what I'm up to, so okay. And then Abraham pushes a little more. Now he's feeling a little bold. He's feeling a little, God has accepted me as a conversation partner. I want you to feel that same feeling. God has accepted me as a conversation partner. Go for it. And he says, well, what if there's just 45? So there's 5 different from the 50. That'd be okay, wouldn't it? And God says, all right, 45. And then works him down to 40. Works him down to 30, down to 20, down to 10. Because Abraham is a negotiator. And God's okay with that. Turns out, apparently, there aren't 10. So the story goes ahead. I want you to think about how willing God is to listen, and how unwilling we, who are usually no more than half right about anything, how unwilling we are to listen, which may be a reflection of our own insecurity about what we're talking about. We don't really know what we're saying. We don't really know the truth. And so we puff out our chests and get big and say it louder as if somehow that makes it more true. But God doesn't do that. God says, I'm not threatened by listening to you. And there's a good lesson for all of us, I think. Don't be threatened just by listening to someone, because by listening, you make them human. By listening, you include. By listening, you make the future new and different. By listening, they know they matter. Like Abraham knows he matters. Like Sarah's still wondering and still insecure because she didn't allow herself fully to engage. But What a great thing. What a great thing that God is willing. How could we do less? How could we be less humble and less open than God is? Well, God bless you this week. May you communicate great.